Let's be honest. Do you really enjoy what you think you enjoy? Every time you pick up your phone out of habit, every time you eat when you're not hungry, every time you laugh at something that doesn't even move you, who's experiencing pleasure in that moment? You? Or the system that trained you to crave stimulation on command? You've been sold the illusion of freedom. But what you're living in is something far more deceptive. A prison made of pleasure. This isn't oppression by force, it's sedation by indulgence. Aldous Huxley predicted it nearly a century ago. There will be no need to ban books because no one will want to read them. No need to hide the truth, just bury it under mountains of distraction. And here we are, a society drowning in choice, yet starving for meaning. A world where everything is instantly available, but nothing truly satisfies. This is the modern paradox. The more accessible pleasure becomes, the less alive we feel. Because in today's world, control doesn't come through fear. It comes through instant satisfaction, wrapped in convenience, comfort, and a constant flood of dopamine. Part 1. The system that turned pleasure into a weapon. Every touch, every ding, every scroll. It's not random, it's engineered. The apps you open, the ads you see, the endless feeds you can't look away from. None of it is accidental. It's all been built with one purpose, to keep you hooked. Pleasure isn't escape, it's engineering. A blueprint to hijack your mind. Precision crafted to hijack your will. Psychology meets code. Attention hijacked for profit. You were taught that pleasure is a reward. But in this world, pleasure has become sedation. A temporary fix to deeper hunger. A tool to numb discomfort, not resolve it. That's the genius of the system. You're not punished to comply. You're entertained into submission. Aldous Huxley saw it coming. He warned that the future wouldn't need tyrants to control the masses. Instead, it would flood them with so many choices, so many distractions, that questioning would feel irrelevant, and truth would simply get lost in the noise. They don't need to burn books. They just need to make you scroll until you forget what it means to read. They don't need to silence dissent. They just need to overload your senses until dissent feels exhausting. And the method? It's not limited to technology. It's everything now. Food isn't nourishment anymore. It's sugar and fat, fine-tuned to trigger dopamine spikes. Entertainment isn't storytelling. It's algorithmic bursts of stimulation, sequenced for maximum addiction. Even relationships. Swipe, match, ghost have become quick hits of validation, stripped of depth, rewired for novelty. Everything is being dopamine-ized. Pleasure is no longer something you earn. It's something you're fed non-stop until you forget what satisfaction ever felt like. But here's the hidden cost. The more reactive you become to pleasure, the less capable you are of feeling it deeply. When gratification becomes a reflex, what happens to your ability to truly feel? Part 2. Addicted to stimuli, numb to meaning. Your brain is being rewired, not subtly, not slowly, aggressively, every single day. We're living in an attention war, and you're not the one firing the shots. You're the one being targeted. Every ping, every buzz, every flash of light. They don't just grab your attention. They shape what your mind considers urgent, and eventually, what your mind considers real. What used to require thought now demands only a thumb. What once demanded silence now gets buried beneath static. Let's be honest. When was the last time you read a book without checking your phone? When was the last time you sat in silence without grabbing a screen? When was the last time you got bored? And just let yourself be bored. We've been trained, conditioned, to escape discomfort the second it arises. And the result? A brain that prefers dopamine over depth, a mind that craves stimulation but rejects meaning. Because here's what most people don't realize. The brain is a feedback loop. The more you feed it cheap pleasure, the less it values anything that takes effort. You become desensitized, not just to content, but to life itself. Conversations feel too slow. Books feel too heavy. Silence feels unbearable. And meaning? Meaning becomes impossible to access. When the mind has forgotten how to sit with something long enough to let it unfold. This is the core of dopamine addiction. You lose not just attention, but depth. You forget how to feel fully. You forget how to think clearly. You forget how to be still, without panic. Because if you can't endure silence, you'll never hear your own voice. Part 3. The future Huxley warned us about. Aldous Huxley didn't fear authoritarianism. He feared pleasure. Not the pleasure of meaning, but the pleasure of distraction. Where George Orwell imagined a future dominated by pain and censorship, Huxley saw a more elegant kind of control, a society so entertained, so overstimulated, that it would lose the very impulse to question. And that is exactly what we're living in now. A world where truth doesn't need to be hidden, because it drowns under a sea of irrelevance. A world where people no longer demand freedom, because they mistake abundance of choice for autonomy. Think about it. You can scroll through 1,000 songs, but you can't finish one without skipping. Abundance has replaced focus. And in the flood, even beauty becomes noise. You can date 1,000 people, but none of them feel worth fighting for. You can stream an infinite number of shows, yet nothing leaves a lasting impact. This is saturation as a strategy, and it's far more effective than oppression. Because when everything is available instantly, value itself begins to evaporate. When everything is pleasurable, meaning becomes intolerable. Huxley called it the love of servitude. But it's not the servitude of chains or force. It's the servitude of always having something to click, something to taste, something to distract. A society kept obedient not by fear, but by comfort. A population that doesn't need to be silenced, because it has already lost the capacity to care. And that is the future Huxley feared most. Not a tyrant with a whip, but a citizen who welcomes distraction as liberation. And when the mind is conditioned to crave ease, it stops seeking truth. But the true danger isn't dopamine itself. It's what dopamine has replaced. And that's something far more essential. Patience. Part 4. The discomfort you were never taught to endure. From the moment you could choose, you were conditioned to believe that if something isn't pleasurable, it's not worth doing. If it feels hard, it must be wrong. If it's boring, it must be broken. If it doesn't spark dopamine in seconds, you swipe, quit, or scroll away. This is the modern equation of meaning, discomfort equals error. And so, an entire generation has been raised not just to avoid struggle, but to see effort as a flaw. You were never taught to sit with boredom, to wrestle with ambiguity, to push through the valley between doubt and mastery. Instead, you were sold the illusion that life should always feel like entertainment. Studying that doesn't feel stimulating? Drop it. A relationship that requires effort? Discard it. A project that takes time with no quick reward? leave it for later. But here's the paradox. Everything meaningful begins as discomfort. Deep love requires patience, vulnerability, and emotional repair. Creative work requires failure, iteration, solitude. Purpose requires doing the hard thing before you understand why it matters. Growth demands delay. You've been trained to expect now. And so the moment struggle appears, you don't meet it with strength. You meet it with flight. Not because you're weak, but because you were never taught how to endure. They didn't show you how to suffer well, how to find stillness inside discomfort, how to turn friction into formation. And that's not an accident, because someone who can't tolerate silence will never hear their own thoughts. Someone who can't bear frustration will never finish what matters. And this is where Huxley went even further than Orwell. In Orwell's world, you were forced to think alike. In Huxley's world, you've lost the ability to think differently. Part 5. The illusion of freedom in a world of infinite options. You believe you're free because you can choose. But the truth is, you're choosing between 1,000 versions of the same distraction. Swipe left, swipe right. Click this video or the one next to it. Scroll this feed or jump to another one. But in the end, you're still consuming noise. What you think is autonomy is often just algorithmic suggestion, wrapped in the illusion of control. Take relationships. You can meet 100 people in a week, but the moment one requires effort, you move to the next. You don't build bonds. You cycle through options. Take learning. You've watched hours of content, yet how much have you actually retained? How much has transformed you? When everything is instantly accessible, nothing feels essential. Because freedom isn't measured by choices. It's measured by what your choices create. Huxley warned us, in a world of endless entertainment, truth doesn't need to be hidden. It only needs to be buried under an avalanche of irrelevance. And that's the brilliance of the system. It doesn't restrict you. It distracts you. It overwhelms you with so many paths that you forget where you were going. So you keep selecting, switching, sampling, but never devoting, never deepening, never arriving. Because when everything is an option, nothing is a commitment. When everything is replaceable, nothing is respected. So how do you protect your mind? Not just from distraction, but from the architecture of manipulation itself? Part 6. How to train mental resistance in an age of overstimulation. You don't need detox. You need discipline. You need to rebuild a mental muscle that's atrophied in silence, neural self-regulation. The real threat isn't overstimulation. It's what it's doing to your reflexes, your capacity to pause, to discern, to choose. Pleasure in itself isn't toxic. But pleasure on demand? That's a different story. Because when pleasure is always accessible, your nervous system forgets how to wait, how to want, how to earn. Here's how you start taking that power back. 1. 10 minutes of stillness. Each day. No devices, no input, just you and your mind. You'll feel anxious, bored, perfect. That's the work. Silence isn't the absence of stimulation. It's the recovery of sovereignty. 2. 1 hour a day with no screens. No scrolling, no checking. Let your nervous system remember what a regulated baseline feels like. That hour isn't empty. It's where clarity begins to re-emerge. 3. The 5-second delay. Before you check the app, reply to the message or open a new tab. pause. Count to 5. This moment of friction is everything. That pause is where instinct turns into intelligence. This isn't about removing pleasure. It's about reintroducing intention. Because if you can pause, you can choose. And if you can choose, you're no longer being controlled. And that, the ability to say no, when the world is screaming yes, is what they fear most. Will you be free or just stimulated? Understanding the system won't set you free. Awareness is not liberation. It's only the first test. Because the real trap is thinking that insight is enough. It's not. Insight without action is just another layer of distraction. You now know the game. You see the structure. But will you choose discomfort over sedation? Silence over stimulation? Discipline over dopamine? The system doesn't fear your awareness. It fears your resistance. Your ability to say no, to pause, to not take the bait. Because when you stop feeding the cycle, you weaken it. You don't need to change the world overnight. You only need to start saying yes to your own agency and no to the compulsions designed to control you. So here's your first move. Comment below, "I take back control." Let it be a line in the sand, a signal dash, not to the world, but to yourself. And in a world built to distract you, presence is rebellion. And once you do that, they lose, and you begin.